Hello orchid friends, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time watching my video, my channel is all about orchids. From what orchids I have, how I grow them, my thoughts on certain orchid topics, to what orchids in my collection are blooming, etc. So if you want to follow along my orchid hobby adventure, please consider subscribing to my channel and turn on the notification. Today in this video, we're going to look at one of my primary hybrid. This one is called Phalaenopsis Philadelphia. It's a cross between two species, that's why it's called primary hybrid, and it's a cross between schilleriana and stuartiana. So this video, I'm going to share with you the way I care for this orchid as well as its orchid bloom progression. And so I think let's start with the root system of this orchid. So this orchid is grown in the semi-hydro setup, and the root system have already grown into the reservoir, which is really good news when it comes to semi-hydro, because for the roots that are in the reservoir, unless there's something shocking that happens, usually the roots are pretty much used to the high moisture, high water condition that normally you don't have to worry about root rot issues. And so this is when this happens, this is what I call the autopilot mode for semi-hydro, because I don't have to worry about repot because it's grown in an inorganic media that does not break down due to old age. And unless this orchid is overflowing with its roots or have outgrown this container, then I would probably do a repot. Otherwise, I don't have to worry about repot at all. But if you have orchids in bark chips or sphagnum moss or even cocoa husk, then cocoa fiber, then I think every 2-3 years you'd really have to look at the possibility of repotting the orchid, because the media do break down over time. Organic media do break down over time. And for this method, in my setup, I use a outer cup to block sunlight. And that way, it's easy for me to look at the roots through the transparent cup. If there is algae, if I don't use the outer cup, there could be algae, and that way, it defeats the purpose of using a transparent pot for me to be able to observe the root system. But if algae is not a problem for you, you don't really need to use an outer cup. It's just that my setup, I prefer using outer cups, but then my setup, because my orchids are not super huge, so I still get to use regular 16-ounce cups and still be able to get by without having to use a bigger container size. When it comes to fertilizer, I only use quarter-strength fertilizer of the recommended dosage that you see on the instruction label. And I do go by the weekly fertilization mantra, right? You would rather use a weaker concentration of fertilizer, but then give fertilizer to your orchid on a higher frequency. And I think that has worked pretty well for most people. And for me especially, I don't have to worry about burning the roots, because when there is such high concentration, once your orchid roots are stressed, then you're probably setting back the orchid. And this orchid is pretty charming. It really has the characteristics from both parents. So the top portion of the flower really reminds me of schilleriana and the color combination, but the bottom of the flowers, you can totally see stuartiana in it. This orchid unfortunately doesn't have a very strong fragrance. It does have something, but it's not strong that you can just smell the fragrance without putting your nose very close to the orchid. Last year, this orchid bloomed I think it was 4 flowers. This year it's doing much better, so it's giving me 6 flowers total, no bud blast, which is very good news. And I think a couple reasons that might have contributed to more blooms this year. I did increase for my fertilizer frequency. That's number one. Number two, with orchids, they get better with age. As they become more and more mature, their bloom count typically would increase until they reach their maximum potential. But this maximum potential, there isn't a set number, because some people, different people growing the same type of orchid in different environments, their maximum potential would all be different. And depending on the environment, but also depending on the care that each individual orchid receives, it just depends. But for me, at least I know 6 may not be the maximum, because it's still a pretty young plant. This is only its second flowering. I got this orchid as a seedling, and last year's flowering was the first flowering ever, and this year it's the second one. Another thing interesting about this orchid is it started its first bloom on its second bud. And I remember last year it did the same thing. And I was always puzzled by that, because I thought the first bud that on the flower spike, the oldest bud would always open first. But that doesn't seem to be the case for this one. And this year, I happened to notice about one of its parent, stuartiana, is doing exactly the same thing. So I'm suspecting that that's a characteristics of the stuartiana side of the parentage. My stuartiana is doing that, and now this primary hybrid is doing that as well, starting to open from its second bud, and then it's the third, and then the fourth and fifth, and then the first one started to open, and then the sixth bud, which it just the way that the order of the flower bloom is just pretty interesting. Another thing I want to mention is that last year, my schilleriana, stuartiana, and this Philadelphia, they all came in bloom, but they weren't in bloom at the same time. Schilleriana bloomed earlier, and this year the same thing. And I have already taken my schilleriana to my office 2 or 3 weeks before I made this video. And at the time of this video, right, you see here it's full bloom for this primary hybrid. It's one of its parents, stuartiana, was just still in bud, right? I can see that there is sign that the second bud is about to open, right? But because they don't bloom at the same time. So last year, my plan of having all 3 orchid in bloom side by side to have a comparison video, that plan fell through. And this year, it's not going to happen either, because they simply will not bloom at the same time. And this one being a hybrid of the two, it makes sense that it's in bloom in between, and stuartiana comes later, which is exactly what happened last year. I just want to give you some timing perspective. But this year, I think I'm still going to make that comparison video just for you to see the 3 orchids that I have, what they look like when they are put together. So I'm going to try to do videos, but if I don't have video footage, I'm just going to use photos, so that way we kind of get to see how they differ in terms of their flowers, but then or even on the leaves, because I think schilleriana and stuartiana, even though they're all mottled leaves, they look different. And I just want to put together some comparison video just for the heck of it. And for some reason, this is not a very common primary hybrid to be found in the US. I actually ordered this one from Joseph Wu's Orchid from Taiwan. They came to the US for orchid shows, and I actually made a pre-show order, and then they shipped it to me. So for those of you who are interested, you might want to check out Joseph Wu's Orchid, or you just have to go to more reputable orchid nurseries and their websites to see if they have this particular cross. Because I haven't seen all that many orchid nurseries offering this particular cross. I don't know, it's because it's just rare, or they're no longer in fashion slash popularity. I don't know. But either way, I highly recommend it if you can come across one, because even if it's not in bloom, the leaves are something, you know, interesting to look at. I think orchids in general, even if they're not in bloom, they are great plants to be looked at just for their foliage. And when they're in bloom, it's even more rewarding, especially if they bloom under your care. It's just a very awesome experience to be able to say, wow, all these bloom, you know, happen as a result of my good care and my good, you know, environment combination. So it's a rewarding experience. But anyway, overall, I'm pretty happy with this orchid's performance this year, and I thought we'll make this video and share this with you. This is all I have for you today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to get more orchid related videos from my channel, please subscribe and turn on the notification. I want to wish you happy growing, and I will talk to you in my next video. Ciao!